Welcome back to my series where I'm ranking every single episode from each Doctor's era. Today, we're going to be ranking the 7th Doctor's era and also the 8th Doctor, just because I'm only doing the TV appearances for this. So if I did just an episode of Paul McGann, it'd be like 2 minutes long. The 7th Doctor was initially my favourite classic series Doctor, and he was for a very long time. The 7th Doctor's era really aligns with the new series. You know, it's very companion focused, especially in those final 2 seasons with Ace. So I have a real connection to this era and I just love it. So let's start off with Time and the Rani. Well, what can you say about Time and the Rani? I know I just said I love this era and then I go straight to the bottom of the bottom, but Time and the Rani is just not the bold new reinvention that Doctor Who needed at the time. It feels like a parody of the Colin Baker era. You know, because Colin's era, it got very, very dark and very malicious, but it could also be a little bit silly at times. And that was the perception. The perception of Doctor Who was that it was silly. So Time and the Rani comes along and it's the silliest thing you've ever seen in your life. You've got Kate O'Mara dressing up like Bonnie Langford. You know, you've got these silly little aliens that look ridiculous, and it's all set in a quarry. It's like a parody version of Doctor Who. And the dialogue is very Pip and Jane Baker, and it just is so camp that I can enjoy it for what it is. But to get people back on the show after hiatus, they're insane. I have no idea what they were thinking. So yeah, Time and the Rani is just a bit of a flop. I can enjoy it for what it is, and I love Kate O'Mara and she can do no wrong. But this feels like a real misstep for Doctor Who. Next up, we have Paradise Towers, and I love Paradise Towers. Now, this one's camp, but it takes itself seriously. You know, this season is very camp, but Time and the Rani, I don't think it took itself seriously, whereas this one does. I love the setting of this ancient hotel that has been like overrun. It's just crazy. It's such a great setting. And I feel like it's one of those stories that if it was done now and it was done a bit more darker, it would really, really resonate. I think the Kangs can get a bit grating, but when you have like the old ladies who are cannibals, I love them so much. And that really makes it. When they're trying to eat Mel, so funny. I love it so much. Yeah, so I think the story sometimes throws people off because the characters can be a bit much. But I think the overall vibe is brilliant. Next up is Delta and the Bannerman. I really love the setting of this one. It does really feel like the Doctor and Mel have got on holiday together. You know, you go into this really rundown camp. It feels like one of like the school camps I went to in primary school. You know, we went to this dodgy looking place. You're like, oh my God, you're letting us stay here. I feel like the direction and the design is taking itself more seriously, but some of the guest performances are doing heightened performances and it just doesn't really blend. It's like, is this a camp show or is it not? Moving on to Dragonfire, I think this is a really good introduction for Ace, and I really love Ace and Mel's dynamic through this story. I think they get along really, really well. They match each other. They feel like they're siblings. You know, you've got 2 sisters who just are so polar different, but they still really, really like each other and really get along. And I love that. I think the dragon design is a bit of a misstep. I think that was a bit ambitious. I think classic Doctor Who needs to stop trying with dragons. That's not something they can pull off. Like, let's look at the budget, baby. Let's look at the budget. Have you got the money? No. Then give up. Do something else. It's nice to see the return of Sabalon Glitz, but it makes no sense for poor Mel to go off with him. That is just crazy. What were they thinking? Poor Mel. Next up is Remembrance of the Daleks. This is obviously one of the best Dalek stories of all time. Everyone loves it. You know, you can't go wrong with Remembrance of the Daleks. I think it's the best version of the Imperial versus the Renegade Daleks. I think this is the most successful execution of that compared to the other Dalek stories that do it. It's one of those things where it's like, it's kind of annoying that Davros turns up because like, we get it. He's always there and it's not really a surprise or a reveal. I think Sylvester has completely figured out what he wants his performance to be like at this point as well. And him and Ace have this incredible chemistry straight away. And I love the dynamic that they're doing there. They've really taken the show seriously now. All those elements of camp from the previous season have seemingly been abandoned. But it's still fun and lighthearted at points, but still willing to go into darker and more, and talk about more deeper political things as well. So I really admire Remembrance of the Daleks, and I think it holds up really well. Next up, we have the Happiness Patrol. This is my favorite Seventh Doctor story of all time. I love this story. The thing is, like, a lot of people say, oh, it's camp. It's like, yes, but that's the point. It's incorporated the campness into the plot where it's actually repulsive. You know, all these people pretending to be happy and happy, but at their core, they're miserable. And that's what makes it so sickly. And then you've got the Candyman, which I think is incredible. I think it's an incredible design. That voice is really scary. And I think the actual Candyman costume is creepy. And I'm not afraid to say that. I'm not embarrassed to say that. I think he's creepy. I think if that thing was coming towards you and he's all sticky and gross, I hate sticky and gross things. So I think that's why he sets off something with me. I'm like, oh, he's all sticky and gross. No, I hate it. Hate it. Love this story. And Helen A is such a great villain. And her little dog Fifi. Oh, I love this story. I could talk about this story all day. And in fact, I kind of did on the collection set review I did on my channel. So if you want to hear me keep talking about Happiness Patrol, go watch it there. Next up is Silver Nemesis. This is a story that does not work for me. There is so many elements going on, but none of them go together. And I just really do not get it. I don't get what they were going for. And I don't think it translates well to screen. It's just a really, really odd story. And that's all I'm really going to say about it. Next up is Greatest Show in the Galaxy. This is a story that I used to really, really like. And then when I watched it for collection set, I was like, oh, I don't really love it. I love a lot of the elements. I love the spooky clowns. I love having the gods of Ragnarok, especially when they're sitting in the audience, like, who are these people? You know, it has a lot of great elements, but overall, I think it does work. So I put it in the good category because I think it's a good story, but I'm just not enamored with it. Next up is Battlefield. Now, this is the epitome of all the right elements, but none of it goes together. You know, the return of the Brigadier is kind of even more confusing than Mordred Not Dead. Like, both of them don't really work, in my opinion. You know, the first episode, you've got the Brigadier just stuck in a helicopter. You know, like, what are we doing here? Like, there's no forward momentum. The story's just stalling. It's just stalling and stalling because it needs to hit the 4 parts. And they just don't really know what to fill that time with. Jean Marsh could read the phone book and I'd be gripped. You know, she's just such a great performer. So I love seeing her in this. She does a really, really great job. But yeah, it's just not a story that I really like. I really want to like it, but I just don't. Next up is Ghostlight. I'm happy to admit I'm too stupid to understand Ghostlight. I've watched it a few times to really get my head around it, and it's just not for me. I think stories like this in Doctor Who have a place, and when you're trying to tell these stories that the plot is a bit more vague, but it's more about how it makes you feel, I think it's a purpose for that. You know, I always think about like Twin Peaks, for example. I love Twin Peaks. I've watched that show so many times. And if someone said to me, oh, what does it all mean? I'm like, well, I couldn't tell you what it means exactly. But obviously there's themes and stuff like that that I can relate to. But the thing about Twin Peaks that works for me is because it makes you feel something. That horror that you feel is so real. And there's moments in that show that sticks with you for life. Images that are burnt into my memory. Whereas Ghostlight, it's not David Lynch. You know, I think in order to do this experimental stuff, you have to be really, really, really good in order for it to work for me. And this just isn't it. Next up is The Curse of Fenric. This is obviously a brilliant story. You know, Ace's journey throughout the story is just incredible. You know, you really get more of an insight about how she works and her complicated feelings about her family. The whole vibe of it is really dark and gloomy, and there's something, or the undercurrents, you know, it says it throughout the entire thing about the undercurrents, and it's there, you feel it. I love the music in this story, it's brilliant. Yeah, I really love Curse of Fenric, but it's one of those stories that I think I've watched it too much, that I've spoiled it for myself, that I don't enjoy it as much anymore, which is sad. Next up, we have Survival. This is a story that everyone loves, but I think it's good. I think it's a very good story, but it's just not my favorite. You know, when it comes to Sylvester's season 25 is more my favorite over season 26, whereas I find most people are the opposite. People love season 26 and more. And I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying what I personally prefer in a Doctor Who story. Although it's sad that Ace never got a proper departure story, I think this is still a really good story for her to go out on. I think this story is a really great bridge between classic and new series. I know that's not a brand new original hot take, but it just is. I love the return to modern day Earth, Ace seeing her old friends and they're dubious of her because she's been gone. And I love all that type of stuff. I think that's what really grounds this era. And I wish there was another season where we got a proper goodbye to Ace and there was more of this, because this is what really makes Doctor Who good. So that's the Seventh Doctor's era. I think this is such a solid run. Just looking at my tier list, you can see there's a lot more good than there is bad. And even the ones I've ranked near the bottom, I still find moments of joy out of them, because Andrew Cartmel had like a real idea of what he wanted this era to be. And I think it's plain as day. So let's briefly talk about the Eighth Doctor's very limited TV run. Paul McGann is one of those doctors who I think makes so much sense. It's really brilliant casting. He has a totally different vibe from the classic series doctors. And I think it was the right person to reinvent Doctor Who. And Paul McGann clearly shaped what was to come in the future for the show as well. You know, having someone like David Tennant, who has a very similar suave vibe to it. Like, people are looking for that. You know, the pretty boy Doctor is what we're getting into now. His Doctor is less quirky and less alien, and he's more human. My favorite thing about the Eighth Doctor is where he'll go up to someone and say, oh, you're going to do this in the future. And he just knows everyone and everything, like Father Christmas. You know, he has that magical quality to him. And I really, really love that. A lot of people feel a bit weird about the TV movie. Some people see it as like a failed pilot, but I don't see it in that way. I think this was a successful pilot episode of Doctor Who. It just didn't capture the audience in America, which it really needed. It needed that money. So it's really sad that we didn't see what it could have become, because a lot of the early outlines that we know that would have been for the Eighth Doctor were way before this story was even finalized. You know, you're talking about doing remakes of famous classic stories already, and that doesn't really tie in with the TV movie at all because it's a continuation. So we don't really know what the Eighth Doctor's era would have looked like if it would have looked anything like this. It has the best TARDIS design ever. I love that interior. It's a place that I'd want to live. You know, you really want to move in there. I really like Grace. It's very much like a Scully type character, which I really, really like. And I think they work really well together, and it would have been great if we got more of them. But I think the TV movie is probably one of the best looking Doctor Who stories of all time. It has the budget that it needs, and it looks beautiful. It is just one of the best directed Doctor Who stories of all time. You know, even the new series doesn't even look that good compared to this. It's just a really crisp looking film. I hope one day we get a proper 35mm scan of this film, because it would look incredible in full HD. It would be amazing. And last of all, I'm just going to mention Night of the Doctor. It's not really a full TV episode, but it is a live appearance, and, you know, we should mention it. I still remember watching this when it came out, because I was there as it went live and no one knew what it was going to be about. They didn't know what Doctor was going to be in or nothing. So I assumed it would be a David Tennant short. That's what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a mini episode that led into the Day of the Doctor. And when I first heard Paul McGann's voice, it was like the most like shocking and incredible moment ever. And I still remember that. And I was sitting in my bedroom, and it was just like, I remember like shouting. And it was like one of those like sad little fanboy moments that I don't think I've had since, because I'm 30 and nothing excites me anymore. Nothing's exciting. I haven't had a good day since I was 18 years old. You know, it's all been miserable since. But I think The Night of the Doctor is simple. It's to the point. Paul McGann does a great job. It looks great. It flows well. And it's a really good departure for him. So yeah, I really like Night of the Doctor. And that's the Eighth Doctor. I feel like I just started talking about him and it's done. You know, and that's the sad thing about Paul McGann. Like, you know, he would have had a really good run on TV if he actually had a chance to do so. But yep, what do you think of my Seventh Doctor and Eighth Doctor rankings? Let me know in the comment section below about how wrong I am. And next time, I'll be moving on to the new series with the Ninth Doctor. And so that's the classic series, completely ranked. Anyway, thanks for sticking about, And hopefully you will be back when I rank the entirety of the new series, which I'm hoping to do soon. Okay. Ooh. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Josh Nair's YouTube channel.